Today, let's open up an elemental plane and craft the Wizard's Tower from Stardew Valley, with a bonus compartment to put whatever you want inside, maybe a set of dice, or a snack, or some nugs of crafting moss. And like always, I'm making this at 28mm tabletop scale, but you could build it at any size that works for you. Ah, what's in here? Probably an empty spice jar you don't need. If you don't have one that's empty, you might have an almost empty one, or one you don't need, like this one I had that was just full of dead leaves. What even is this? For the jar I'm using, I don't actually know what lived in here before, so I advise a good bath before proceeding. Then we're going to use a piece of cardboard to cover up the plastic so we have a nice palette that our future bricks can bond with. I'm just putting on some hot glue. Ow! And be very careful, just wrap it around, and then if you want to be extra tenacious, just put another seam of glue down the edge here. I made a trial roof just to get the measurements right using paper, then I used a compass to measure out a more proper, sturdier roof. As you might know from the game, the wizard does not have a normal conical roof. Instead, it gets steeper as it goes up. I think this is part of wizard law, so to follow the wizard design bylaws, I made a smaller cone and fitted over the larger cone. It's pretty quick and dirty right now, but we'll be covering it up with tiles in future steps. I'm removing this plastic flat before it gets in the way later, and then using too much hot glue to secure down the roof. Hey, look at this piece of garbage. It's the foam insert from a soap dispenser seal that I'm going to use for the observatory porthole. Later in the build, I'm going to make the telescope out of more garbage, so be sure to stick around for that. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm a huge nerd, so I'm using a 28mm door template to make sure this tower is equipped to be thrown into a future D&D game. For the bricks, get out a chunk of dollar store foam board and your proprietary texturing tool and get to work on debossing some crinkly details. Next, dice it up into 1cm squares. This can be a bit tedious, so I recommend upgrading to the gold blade in the early game, or the iridium blade. These bricks look a little too factory produced, so let them hang out with some natural rocks for a few minutes. That's looking a lot better. The one on the right is shameful. Now strap in, lather up the tube with glue, and start laying bricks. There's something so satisfying seeing what's basically a toilet paper roll start to become a building. Randomness is key for the wizard aesthetic, so don't worry about tidy rows. I filled in any nooks and crannies with tinier bricks, and then after letting it dry, I trimmed off the excess that was overhanging the window and door frames. I wanted to get rid of the gaps between the bricks and make them look mortared together, so I'm using some big old globs of sculpting paste and smushing it deep into the crevices, then wiping off as much as I can from the surface and stippling the remaining goop with a paper towel. This is looking pretty good, but maybe suspiciously pretty good. So let's scratch and claw at the bricks until we've achieved some appropriate battle scars. With the bricks done, it's time to move on up to the roof. I'm using air-dry clay to create some clay roof tiles. With a glob in hand, I'm rolling out little nuggets until they're a little bigger than a grain of rice. I think this is only about 30 calories worth, so definitely need to eat more if you're trying to bulk up. I'm sandwiching the clay between 2 layers of parchment paper, then rolling them flat until they're about 1 to 2 millimeters thick. Any thinner and they might crumble too easily. Normally I might wait for these to dry, but I'm trying something new I saw on Frankie D. Crafter's YouTube channel. I'm spreading out a layer of white PVA glue and then attaching the tiles while they're still a little bit wet so I can still form them a bit. My previous method involved trying to handle dry, wafer-thin shingles and having way too many just crumble in my hands. So I gotta say I love the moist method. This was super crucial as I got close to the tip and needed to form the pieces into a point. Thanks, Frankie. Now let's get down to basics with a base. I'm taking a strip of foam board and cutting it into 6 equally sized 4x5 inch pieces. Before gluing them together, I'm roughing out a staircase, making each layer of foam into one step. If you have a solid piece of styrofoam or maybe a big piece of insulation foam, that would definitely be a lot easier for carving and so you wouldn't have to glue them together like this. But since all I have on hand is foam board, I'm using the spray adhesive to connect them all together into one solid piece. I want to carve this piece of foam to resemble a dirt plateau, similar to what the Wizard's Tower sits on in the game, so I'm using a blade to cut out random slices to resemble crumbling earth. Paint and dirt will come later, but for now, I just remembered a piece of treasure I have. It's this random LED ice cube I got somewhere, which I'm mining for its precious lighting effects and then embedding in the bottom of the base. My goal here was to underlight the tower so that you could see all the wizard spells being cast through the windows. Time to paint. I'm starting out with a black magic base coat of black primer and Mod Podge. Just go ahead and pour... Oh, I'm out. Well, that's okay. Instead, grab a void essence and...
The Elemental Wars.
This thing's quivering with dark energy, which is perfect for sealing up things from the elements. Milk a few drops and spread it all over the base and the tower and the roof. Make sure to spread it all around except for the windows. You don't want a single hex getting through. The clay tiles on the roof were feeling a little weak, so I made sure to do 2 coats for extra Mod Podge strength. This is looking extra crispy and it needs more paint, but I suddenly felt like making a door. I cut a small piece of balsa wood and textured it with a sharp pointy thing, then thought about what I'm going to do for the window's circular pane. I need a short tube, but I only have this long tube. This'll work. Some people call this granny grading, but cross stitch is for everyone, so I'm going to call it person plastic. Cut a small piece of person plastic and put it inside your circular window pane. Then press it so hard you split your door, and then I'm gluing on a tiny metal bead I'm using as a doorknob. Now a lot of people don't know this, but you can actually disperse paint through a prismatic shard. For the bricks, I'm mixing together some gray and brown paint to make a brownish gray, not to be confused with grayish brown. And yikes, that's a lot of paint. In hindsight, I would have used way less and done a gray overbrushing so I could retain some of the black in the cracks. With my leftover brownish gray, I'm adding in a bit of off-white and painting a highlight on the top of each brick to emulate the exaggerated lighting and shadows in the game's pixel art. Then I used this flat chisel brush to dry brush the entire tower in the same shade to bring out some of the raised details. Since there are so many crevices in the roof tiles, I saved time and spray painted it in a light blue and then used this beautiful blue bonnet for dry brushing and for highlighting the edge of each tile. Let's paint the port window gold, realize we don't like it at all, then paint it copper instead. Nice. Your void essence should still have some dark energy left, so pour out some into a chalice. We're going to use this as a dark wash to bring out the details and tie the whole paint job together. Coincidentally, the arcane compounds of dark energy are basically water, acrylic paint, and dish soap. And here's the part where I wish I would have tested the strength of this wash before jumping straight in. I think it's a bit too dark since it ends up obscuring some of the highlights on each brick and tile. Next time I'd use way more water. Anyway, lessons learned. Don't forget to do some tiny dabs to clean up the extra wash. Since the painting's done, I'm attaching some of the wood details. For these windows, I'm using this 1mm balsa wood. If you cut it into thin strips against the grain, the wood is extra bendy if you're careful. This allows you to slide it into small curved areas. And for the window grills, I'm slicing up a few thin sticks of balsa wood. Using 2 pieces of wood, I'm cutting out 2 tiny notches in the center of each one, then fitting the slots together to create a T, also known as a cross in biblical crafting circles. Make sure to trim the edges ever so slightly so you get a nice snug fit. Nice. That's some plain wood. Let's use some Citadel Agrax Earthshade to make it rich and luscious. You could also use any conventional wood stain or a diluted oil paint using mineral spirits. Don't forget the windows. As for the base, I sprayed it brown off camera to prep it for a healthy coating of dirt. There are 3 tubs here, but I'm really only using the fine dirt in the upper right and some choice pebbles from the one on the left. Give the whole thing a generous coating of watered down glue or Mod Podge, then sprinkle on some dirt until you have full coverage. This dirt tends to crumble off, so to really seal it in, I'm first spraying it with 99% isopropyl alcohol, then watered down Mod Podge to finish it off. The alcohol is to help the glue flow into the littlest crevices. And heck, why not add a little more dirt to cover up any spots we might have missed? To finish off the dirt, I'm adding a few crown jewels, which is a few choice pebbles to add a little variety and randomness. At this stage, the dirt is already dirt color, which is good, so you could call it done, but I'm going for a nice brown to yellow gradient like the Stardew dirt. For that, I'm breaking out the airbrush and spraying some yellow on the top portions and brown for everything near the base of the base of the base. This has kind of a nice desert vibe right now, but you know we gotta get that grass. I'm using 4mm static grass and a grass applicator to magic the blades onto a layer of watered down Mod Podge. This thing is fun, but it's kind of an overly expensive tool. Sprinkling on static grass or flock by hand still totally looks great. Don't forget to save your extra grass for later. Hey, while we enjoy these detail shots, now's the compulsory moment where I ask you to leave a comment about what you want to see me craft next. Thanks. Like, comment, subscribe. Next, grab a piece of moss from behind a dwarf's ear horn thing and tear off a few choice bits to use as a climbing vine up the side of the tower. I'm using white PVA glue to attach small bits at a time until it's a single strand. Then I'm using glue and fine green flocking to make the vines a bit more overgrown and using the same flock to add some moss in various places. For the final base details, I'm adding in some clump foliage from Woodland Scenics and then this tiny wood box that I made off camera. Oh, I almost forgot to make the telescope out of trash. Here's a piece of plastic I scooped from the recycle, which I'm going to glue together into a slight cone. I'm adding some banding around the end for extra detail using cardboard, then aggressively chopping the whole thing in half and fitting back together with a nice upward bend. For the metal rivets, I'm dabbing on tiny dots of white PVA glue, which will give some nice raised surface detail when I paint it. I first paint this trash glossy black, then a layer of gold, and then a layer of Citadel Reichland Earthshade to give the gold a nice warm and used tint. For the telescope's lens, just keep cracking open geodes until the RNG gives you an aquamarine. The roof still needs a window, so let's pay a visit to the recycle. I can't say enough good things about these clear plastic apple cases. I now have a lifetime supply of these clear plastic domes. Now let's make whatever this is. I didn't have beads, but I did have some tech deck wheels, which are basically beads for skater boys. I glued the wheels to a paper clip, then glued the paper clip to a stick, then glued the stick to the tower. Hey, you like my flawless rooster drawing? I cut it out of some plastic plate and then attached it to the top of the tower. And for the final cherry, the telescope on top. Dunzo. Roll the beauty shots. Hey, thanks for watching. This was a real fun build, but before you go, let me know down below what other kinds of things you'd want to see crafted in the future. Or let me know what kind of farm you had in Stardew Valley. I was a mayonnaise man myself. Or let me know if you wish you could romance the wizard. As for the next crafting video, I'm leaning towards something in either the Zelda or Studio Ghibli universe, so I recommend a good click on the old bell. Until then, this is Studson Studio, and it's been a joy having you here today.